we do this with ourselves too. We think that it's best to get to what you want fastest with as little effort as possible.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
So we can do that with our kids. But if we watch them kind of struggle to get what they want, they're learning, they're growing, they're getting stronger because we aren't giving them what they need the instant we see what they are going for.
Welcome to Scholé Sisters, the podcast for classical homeschooling mamas who yearn for something more than just checking boxes and getting it all done. Scholé Sisters discusses topics that matter to those of us who believe that educating ourselves through reading widely, thinking deeply, and applying faithfully equips us for the task of educating our children. I'm your host, Brandy Wenzel. You can come study Charlotte Mason with me over in the Charlotte Mason Think Tank. Go to afterthoughtsblog.net/think tank to learn more. My co-hosts today are Mystie Winkler and Abby Wall. Mystie is a homeschooling mom of 5, including 2 graduates. She writes and podcasts at simplyconvivial.com and is the author of The Convivial Homeschool, now available on Amazon. Abby is basically the queen of the Scholé sistership. Abby is a country-living farmer, rancher, a loving wife, and mom of 5 who homeschools and reads whenever she can. Are you ready for this year's spring training? It's going to be amazing. We're calling it Dead White Guys. The latest attack on classical education seems to be the claim that classical education should be discarded because much of the source material was written by white men. We've hired Monique Dusson and Krista Bontrager from the Center for Biblical Unity to fit us for conversing on these issues. Session 1 is all about critical theory, and Session 2 is basically a defense of classical education against the attacks of critical theory proponents. Each session ends with a live Q&A. It's going to be so great. For more information, go to scholésisters.info/CRT. That's scholésisters.info/CRT. Today's episode is our attempt to straighten out one of the biggest misunderstandings in the Charlotte Mason world: masterly inactivity. The term is constantly misused, so we'll start off with definitions, but keep listening because we're going to go into detail about how exactly this concept can be applied to real life. You're going to love this conversation, and so without further ado, let's get to it. Let's start off with our Scholé every day. Who would like to go first?
Because I was late, because I was in the wrong
This is her discipline.
meeting room, I am making myself go first and cheerfully doing it. Okay. So years ago, I read a book by Twyla Tharp called The Creative Habit. And this woman's incredible. She is a choreographer and she works for like New York Ballet and all these different things. She's won lots of awards on like for like TV for her choreography and everything like that. She's just really, really interesting. And her original book was talking about her creative process, which is basically a liturgy. She does the same thing every single day. Well, I happened to go into my library the other day to pick up some holds, and I always try to peruse kind of the new bookshelf. And this was on there and I recognized the author, and it's called Keep It Moving. And it's called Lessons for the Rest of Your Life. And she is 78 years old and she is still active, exercising, creating, and basically living this full life.
That's amazing. Is this rude for me to buy this for my mom for her 70th birthday?
No, you should totally do it. I love her writing.
Okay.
But you should buy it for yourself to read too.
Okay. We'll see if I get it for her. I could borrow it.
Oh yeah, there you go. You can borrow it. I like that. But she even has some like simple exercises and movements that you can do, like kind of spread throughout each chapter. But she has this quote, and just give me a second to find it. The fact is, we are all lazy, even me. No, that she does say that. But let's see. Since it's not my book, I don't have it underlined. So just okay. Here it is. When you approach the care and feeding of your body as a job, a second career equivalent in value to all the other ways you pay the bills, you are channeling a farmer's work ethic. I liken fitness to farming. can you just take a moment to just appreciate this for all the things in my life? And I know you guys are just rolling your eyes a little bit, but you also get this.
Totally.
Okay, a farmer does the same two things every day: show up to work and adapt to what he finds there. A farmer's life, raising animals, milking cows, cultivating crops, is the quintessential physical life. The hours are grueling. There are no days off. There's always more to do. It's dangerous, more lethal than any other occupation, except I think mining has higher deaths, but it's just not very many people are miners. So anyway, and the entire enterprise can be wiped out in a flash at the whimsy of Mother Nature, or we will call it Providence, right? Yet the farmer persists on this onerous activity, usually well into old age, because there is a sensory delight in growing things and renewal in each season's arrival, not to mention the honor of feeding people. The rewards outweigh the grinding rigors and unwelcome surprises, and in fact, are more precious because of the hardships met and overcome. She basically has a philosophy of why we should stay and maintain activity. And it's so different than almost any other exercise book I've read, because it's not about aesthetics, right? So much of health culture is all about aesthetics, but she is talking about it being basically having the will and the discipline, and why you want this is because for your lifelong, you're going to have your body with you, and there is no separation, right? I really love her writing. She's a good writer, and I've commonplaced so many things out of her book, and she has just anecdotes and stories throughout it. But I've just been really, really enjoying this book, and I highly recommend getting it from your library, or maybe even buying it if you are interested in having an idea about longevity and health and wellness into your whole life.
Cool.
Very cool.
Are you trying to make me go next, Misty?
I am.
All right. Mine is Alex Epstein's book, Fossil Future: Why Global Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, Coal, and Natural Gas, Not Less.
So we're not going to go controversial today at all. Great. I love it.
I live in oil country. It would be controversial for me to say that I wanted to do less of that.
No, I love it. I'm all for fossil fuels. You can't get around it in farming.
But I'm actually a huge fan of natural gas, though not a fan of my natural gas bill, which more than doubled compared to last January. I about died when I saw it. But anyway, that is actually my government's fault and not the fault of the fuel. My state government, not my national government. Let's just blame Gavin. Anyway, Alex Epstein has 2 books on fossil fuels. And the other one is he's a philosopher. So he makes like a morality issue on why it is moral to use fossil fuels. I'm guessing, having not read it, that it has to do with the number of lives that are saved when you bring electricity into an area.
Yes.
That's my big guess. Okay. So I was really looking forward to this book, and I'm not saying not to get it, but his writing drives me insane. Insane. So I basically brought a book to complain about. It feels almost like John Piper or something. Like he's repeating himself over and over again. And I'm like, where is your editor? And who let you get away with this? So I feel like some people
you're just throwing people under the bus.
It's true, though.
Oh my gosh.
I've not read any of John Piper.
Oh gosh. I'm like, people tell me they like John Piper. I was like, I have a hard time.
I just can't.
I really can't. Like, and this is the thing, is that the content of the books by Piper that I have read is valuable, which is why it's frustrating to me that someone did not tell him the truth about his writing style. And I feel the same way about this guy, because I do find what he's saying valuable, but so it already drives me crazy when people say, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and tell them what you told them, because I hate it when people do that to me. And I'm like, I got it. Don't repeat yourself, because now I'm irritated. But this is next level of that. I mean, it's just like, I felt like the first chapter, I read it twice, but I didn't read it twice. It was just repeating itself so much that it was like, I could have read it twice. You know what I'm saying? He said everything twice. anyway, I'm trying to get past that because my understanding is that like he's got great footnotes, he's got great sources, he's got great arguments. Like he has a good reputation. But I actually think he is one of those people that is like could be a great writer. Because like Piper, when he writes poetry, it's great, right? But with poetry, it's brevity, right? So this guy, I'm guessing just from the things that the content that's in it, also could be a good writer, but isn't because somebody is not disciplining him.
Well, every writer has to have a ruthless editor.
That's
if
true.
It's going to be good writing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, even for the show, I can be ruthless sometimes with myself because I repeat myself. And then I cut it out so people don't have to listen to me because I don't think anyone should have to listen to that.
I'm fine with you being ruthless editor on the podcast. You always make me sound way smarter than I am.
I'm letting people see the real you, Abby.
That's okay.
I don't want you to get in the way of people seeing the real you.
That's right. Thank you. If only I had an edit button all the time with me, like a little edit button on the shoulder.
I feel your pain on that one. That's true. I feel like, okay, I'm just reading it. I'm going to read it fast. Maybe I can grow in virtue in trying to not be annoyed by him because I'm reading the life of Pericles with my Plutarch class. And one of the things was that Pericles was just unflappable and didn't let things get to him. And I'm like, okay, if Pericles could do it, I can do it.
Yep. But if you pick this book, you're doing it to yourself. So why are you doing it?
Because I have heard that he has valuable arguments that I have not heard before.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm trying to get at is what is he? I mean, I honestly, if you want to talk about really where I'm controversial, I actually don't buy that these fuels are from fossils because I just don't believe you can have that many dead animals. I don't buy it. I take the idea that there's actually some sort of organism that produces oil. That's why when we dry up a well here, you go back 10 years later and it has started to refill itself. Anyway, so I actually think oil, probably not coal. I don't know much about coal, honestly. We don't have coal here. I don't know anything about it. But I actually think oil is a renewable, but I can't prove it. So he does not believe that. He just believes there's so much of it that it's silly to act like you're worried about it running out. You're only worried about it running out because the government wants you to be worried about it running out. So he testifies before governments and things about this as, like an expert witness in the sense of the moral philosophy behind this. So I thought, well, he's worth reading and I'm just going to muscle through the part of his writing that annoys me.
All right.
We'll see. Anyway, yours is way better than mine. So why don't you tell us what you're reading? I love your book.
Mistie's putting us to shame again.
That's right.
It's the first of the year, right? So I'm trying to knock out those really impressive books.
Okay. There you go. So you're saying you show off in January?
It's really convenient that recording happens at that time too.
I see how you're doing it. You're stacking the deck.
I tell you.
The deck.
Well, this is on audio.
Okay.
I'm reading Eusebius, the Church History. So I don't know, it came up on several different lists last year or just referenced by other things I read last year. So
it's so good.
But Lisa A is going through it in Sistership.
I know. I just go through and browse the posts, but I'm not keeping up. But there is a helpful conversation on Eusebius in Sistership right now.
Yeah.
It's been really good. Although it's one thing that's kind of confusing about the audio. I'm reading the one by Paul Meyer.
Yeah.
So it has great footnotes and explanatory comments at the beginning and end and all that. But it's read by someone, not the author. And there's no distinction in the way he reads Eusebius versus Paul Meyer.
Oh, no.
And the footnotes. And then on top of that, Eusebius also quotes his sources pretty extensively.
Yeah.
So I'm listening and I'm just like, well, I'm getting as much information as I can out of this. And I'm not sure if I'm currently listening to Eusebius or Eusebius's source or Paul Meyer.
Oh, gosh. So you too brought a book to complain about.
It's really great though. I mean, just there was so much going on in the early church, kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah. I require that for high school graduation. So,
cool.
And it's for that reason, because it just, when you start to read it and it's that whole, oh, so we've been through this before.
Yeah.
It's like, there's been some version of all of our troubles before this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great version. I think that if I was going to do it with students, we would definitely have the written version.
Yeah, for sure.
But the notes by Paul Meyer and all of that are super helpful when I can tell that, oh, that's what this is a summary, or this is a whatever. And he notes that, the places where sometimes Eusebius's long quotes of his sources no longer exist. So that's another reason why Eusebius is so valuable. It's because he's actually a source for earlier sources.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
When did Eusebius live? Do you know?
Is he in the 400s?
Okay.
I'm not sure. I mean, I just, for some reason that comes to my mind. I'm looking them up.
Yeah. I'm going to say Google real quick, but yeah, AD 314.
Okay.
So 4th century. That's probably what I was thinking.
4th century. Yeah.
Hey, I had no idea. So, but usually when it's a one name, it's pretty early. So
true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Unless you're Madonna.
Oh, don't start.
Hello, Abby here to tell you about Sistership, the place for moms learning and growing. We embrace the call to shape culture by starting with our own education, our own library shelves, and thinking and planning how to spend our time. We need to be equipped for the great task of educating our children. Sistership is the place to talk about reading widely, a place to discuss and think deeply, and share how you are faithfully applying the ideas you encounter. Sistership is for all the women serious about education for themselves and for their families, but understand that in order to educate, we can't take ourselves too seriously. Join us in Sistership for the camaraderie and stay for the fun.
So today we're discussing Charlotte Mason's concept of masterly inactivity. And it's only hers in the sense that she named it. I think we can find evidences of this type of an approach to handling children. I say handling because she expects teachers to do it also, but we can see this approach throughout history. But that phrase, she coined the term, as far as I know. She took it from an essay and then adopted it. It was kind of applied to something else, but she took it and adopted it to describe this thing that we're talking about today. And the main reason why we're talking about it is because people get it wrong all the time. And by the way, I did too in the beginning. So I'm not like putting myself outside of the word people.
Yeah.
I don't know if either of you were like this, because it could be that you actually learned about it in context, but I heard people throwing the word around when I was a very young mom. And so I thought that was a fancy thing that I could call my child's free time. So when he was off doing his own thing, he was being masterly inactive. And that is not at all it. At all, because masterly inactivity is something mothers do. So it's not something children do.
Right.
Because it is so misunderstood, and because I don't actually want to get on the internet and be the masterly inactivity police, we're just going to do an episode.
Are you sure you really don't want to be?
I mean, sometimes I do. When I think about what is a good use of my time, then I don't. So we just thought we would do our part to help straighten all of this out. We're basically going to talk about two parts of it, because we're going to define it, and then we're going to talk about why it's valuable, that means it's 3 parts. And then we're going to talk about like how to pull it off.
Take another sip of coffee. It hasn't kicked in yet.
Seriously. Actually, I think I'm just overstimulated from co-op is what's going on. I want us first to start by coming up with a working definition of masterly inactivity, because there's actually a lot of different angles on why she uses these specific words. So I don't know if you want to start with masterly or inactivity, but I kind of feel like we should pull it apart and talk about each part, because she's very purposeful in putting these 2 words together.
Mm-hmm.
Do with that what you will.
Well, I just had my own 2-word paraphrasing that I think is more communicative communicative, especially today. I never know if it's like, is it just the earlier period that the words that she puts, I mean, this isn't the only instance, but I think it's a prime instance where it's like Charlotte Mason made up this term for something that you actually can't understand without reading all of her work. It's like, this could have been named better. So if you're saying that she was intentional about these two words, I'm excited to hear about that, because I'm like, that was a poor choice.
I mean, maybe she felt really artsy when she took it out of an essay and applied it to this.
So I think two words that could summarize what she meant, and you can tell me, Charlotte Mason Police, if I get this correct or incorrect, but I would say mothers should have a non-interfering watchfulness.
I like it.
I really like it. Yeah. There is another place where she calls it wise letting alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you come with, Abby?
I put uninterrupted, right? And I was thinking about the things that it is. So I was kind of bringing up those points. So I don't want to take away from necessarily the words. And also the self-restraint part of a mother to not interrupt. So very similar to what you're both discussing. So yeah.
I do think the word inactivity is how it got kind of confused with free time.
Yeah.
Because there is this implication, if we're not interfering, then hypothetically the child is having free time.
Yeah.
Right. It's just that the word itself, it's a reference to us.
Not the child.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the other confusing thing about the word inactivity is that I think the basic assumption or the typical use means doing nothing. And she didn't mean that.
Right.
So that's where it's a confusing term, because by inactivity, she doesn't actually mean like mom's napping in another room while the child goes wild.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that was it. It's like kind of an environment that engages rather than entertains. Cause I think there is, right. It's an engaged type of activity for the kids. It's not a passive, inactive entertainment. I think that was what my delineation was.
When she says wise letting alone, I think that's helpful because the wisdom component, it points to the idea that we know what's going on. Like, how could I wisely let you alone if I don't know you and what you're up to? And, so there's this knowingness that's underlying that term versus with masterly. I feel like that's more the self-restraint, the I want to interfere in some way. I remember the first time I tried masterly inactivity, actually, I read the chapter on masterly inactivity from School Education, which is chapter 3, I think, actually, if anybody wants to go read it. I read it and I was like, oh, I think I do. I'm super helpful with my little kids in ways that they don't need. I remember thinking like, I am going to actively try to be inactive. I'm going to restrain myself, even if that means I'm just waiting an extra minute before I interfere. I think that helped me transition to being this interfering person of just, well, I'm not saying I'm not going to interfere ever. I'm saying I'm going to wait longer and see what happens. And it became like, get the popcorn. These kids are hilarious. But I remember the first time because we were at the park and I see one of my toddlers trying to get into a swing. And it was the kind of thing where I would have just shown up and picked her up and put her into the swing. She wasn't actually asking for help. So I just watch her and I watch her struggle and fall off and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, she was at it for 15 minutes or whatever. She eventually got into the swing. And then she asked me to push her once she was in. But I thought, man, I don't know all that she learned in that period of time. Right. But if I had just rushed in and helped her when she hadn't asked for help, I would have circumvented that whole whatever it was that was going on with her. Like she was very determined.
And her determination was rewarded.
Right.
When you didn't step in to just make things easy for her, to like get her to the end faster.
Okay, that's a really good point, because I do think we often think of the temptation to interfere in the sense of, those moms that want to prevent their kids from reaping negative consequences. So it's this controlling, I don't want my child to make a bad decision. But in the places where I was being helpful, I actually would have mostly stolen what you're saying. There are rewards for hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And not on purpose, just because it looks like you want to date in a swing and I could put you there. So there you go.
Well,
Right?
I think this shows the heart of what we think is best. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of suddenly going maybe way too off topic, but we do this with ourselves too. We think that it's best to get to what you want fastest with as little effort as possible.
Oh, it's not the truth.
So we can do that with our kids. But if we watch them kind of struggle to get what they want, they're learning, they're growing, they're getting stronger because we aren't giving them what they need the instant we see what they are going for. I mean, I know a lot of ways we could look at these instances and see how God parents us, and we're trying to mimic the way he parents, because God knows the good things that we're trying to get to, and he doesn't just zap us with perfection. Although he could, he has that ability. That's not the way he's set up the world to work.
That is such a good point. I have a quote for you from Charlotte Mason's Masterly Inactivity chapter, because she talks about ultimately this type of parenting or this type of managing of children being an act of faith. And then she says, when we recognize that God does not make over the bringing up of children absolutely, even to their parents, but that he works himself in ways which it must be our care not to hinder in the training of every child, then we shall learn passiveness, humble and wise.
Wow.
So she actually thinks that when I'm out there being like, I can take care of this for you, dust myself up, right? And like, fix everything for me, that I'm actually, there's an element of me being prideful when I'm doing that. And that when I learn to stand back and watch, it's more an act of, I'm going to wait and see what God will do. I'm putting this margin where I am anticipating that God will do some of the work instead of it being all on me. When she talks about the mother being grasping in this way, it's because I've decided it's all on me. And if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. Which haven't we all had that feeling?
Yeah. We're just finishing up our tectonic seminar, and the final chapter in the book that I am leading the discussion on is Barefoot and Balanced. And it's pretty much the final chapter is all about this letting kids alone. And one of the quotes is, when we allow children adequate time to play without adult interference, we observe significant changes in the way children play over a short period of time, sometimes in just a week. We also notice that it consistently takes children about 45 minutes the first few days to get into like deep play. And that's what she was talking about. It involves purpose and not merely exploratory by nature. And a little bit further on, it says, however, children need time, patience, and opportunity to step back from adults for this to occur. And this doesn't mean that they're not being watched, because they are, but it's without that interference and how much time it takes for the way kids process through things. And they get better at it with more practice. So I think of oftentimes like the kids that just come up and like, I'm bored. Are asking for things. And that can be part of it too, is standing firm and saying, well, go find something to do, go and make something happen. Like keep trying, because they're often looking for a schedule if you've been so scheduled. So.
Yeah. My kids know if they ask me for something to do, I'm just going to give them housework.
I love it.
And they also know if they're just sitting around on the couch doing nothing, I'm going to give them housework.
Quick, look busy. Mom's coming. Oh, that's funny. This ties into our episode on grit so much. When we put the schedule together, I didn't think about how it was important that we were doing both of them. We talked in that episode about how really to develop grit, what that really means for a child to develop it is that cause and effect are tightly bound together. So when a child does something, he gets to feel the effects of the cause that he is through his actions, right? And she talks about that in her chapter. So she says, every time a child feels that he chooses to obey of his own accord, his power of initiative is strengthened. So she's talking about how, like, when we back up and we give them a chance to make their own moral decisions, we give them a chance to fail, right? So that he actually starts to feel his own power of choosing to do what is right. You know, with grit, it was more physical. We wanted them to feel like, you know, I planted this in my garden and I grew it and I ate it. There was this real physical component to it. And here she gets into, likewise, we want that to happen on the moral level, where we're not just micromanaging all of their decisions, but they're actually choosing for themselves, and they get to reap that satisfaction of knowing that they chose what was right. They chose it to do it on their own. Again, it's that grit in the sense of they felt the strength of their own power. It is satisfying to face temptation and know you made the right decision. But we often don't want them doing that because they make us nervous.
Yeah. And, you know, when kids are younger, like there's a legitimate fear, right? You do want to make sure that they're safe and things like that. But almost all control is based on fear. And we are told not to be fearful. And that is one thing that I've been reading a marriage book, and it's actually really, really helping me with my teenagers right now. And I will mention the marriage book in Sistership. I will not put it on the podcast. So if you want more information, I will let you know, because it's secular, but it's very good. So control is based in fear. And, you know, we get into the habit of controlling lots of things for our kids, right? We choose a lot of things for our toddlers, our young kids. And some parents go onto the other ditch where they just let their kids choose everything. And that causes problems because then anytime they don't get a choice, it's, you know, so there's that kind of middle ground that there's building autonomy. They are getting the idea that they get to have control over some of their choices and lives. But, you know, as you get older kids and boys and teenagers and girls and things like that, sitting back and not nagging them about, like, put your seatbelt on, and having the same lecture over and over, like, it's the law, it's stupid if you don't, like, all these different things. And sometimes all you actually have to do is close your mouth and wait a minute. And they actually do it themselves, but you've gotten in the habit, right? It's just bad habit training for yourselves. So one of the ideas from this marriage book is just duct tape. Just close your mouth. You actually don't need to share your opinion about everything. And it's really helping my relationship with my teenagers. Like, I can listen and say, I hear you. Yeah, interesting. And not have to share all the opinions. And oftentimes they will ask me for my opinion, and then, you know, we can have a discussion, but the listening first. So anyway, that is to say, this control, it gets so much harder as your kids grow up and they actually do need to make those decisions and those choices themselves. And trying to control them when it's based in fear, it doesn't do anything for your relationship. It's actually really harmful, because controlling, you know, it's the self-control of keeping quiet, praying, and approaching it at a time that is not in the moment of, you know, heightened emotions.
Yeah.
Right before my oldest left for college, within 6 months before that, I wrote a Masterly Inactivity post. I write them on occasion on my blog that I called A Million Letting Goes. And it was after I had finished reading Till We Have Faces. This isn't really like a controlling based in fear. So the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I do think there's another aspect of controlling this that is maybe more rare, but I think it does exist, and it probably pays for us to be aware of it. If you guys remember Until We Have Faces, I think Lewis does a brilliant job of making us feel like Oral is wrong, but it's because she's misguided. She misunderstands.
Okay.
We're like, yes. Okay. So we know, because we know, are familiar with the myth, and we're kind of the third party outside watching the story. So we know she's actually married to this God who adores her, and she could have this magical life. But we think, you know, Oral is afraid that she's married to a monster, and Oral she loves her and she wants what's best for her. Right. And then we get to the end of the book and we realize that Oral is just selfish.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to read this is just part of Till We Have Faces, because it actually goes on for many pages. But she gives her confession near the end. And she says, you said a brute would devour her. Well, why didn't it? I'd have wept for her and buried what was left and built her a tomb. But to steal her love from me, can it be that you really don't understand? The girl was mine. What right had you to steal her away into your dreadful heights? I was my own and Psyche was mine and no one else had any right to her. Oh, you'll say you took her away into bliss and joy such as I could never have given her. And I ought to have been glad of it for her sake. Why? What should I care for some horrible new happiness, which I hadn't given her and which separated her from me? Do you think I wanted her to be happy that way? Did you ever remember whose the girl was? She was mine. Do you not know what that word means? Mine. Like she just has this horrible grasping selfishness. And I had this moment when I was reading this book and I was like, this is the temptation of motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
To take this creature that we love, that we helped make, our bodies made it, but to grasp it and say, this is mine. It's mine to do with what I will, or to like deny them the rights of growing up because they're mine and I'm going to hold on to them and I'm going to be controlling. You know, we can delude ourselves into saying we're being kind, we're being loving. Maybe we were misguided. We meant for the best, but I actually think there can be in some of us this temptation to be that selfish. We don't want them to be competent without us. We don't want them to we want to be needed.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be valued. We want to be the center of their world. Sometimes it's a heartbreak, right? Like you are the center of their world when they're first born and you are feeding them. And then that changes and their world opens up. And some of us don't handle very well being left behind. So we don't want them leaving home.
Or even just that, but sentimentalizing being little. I'd like say,
Yes.
oh, don't grow up. It's like, what a terrible.
Yes.
That's not good parenting.
Yes.
Yes, I think there is some selfishness there, but I still feel like it's a fear thing. Like if
for
you're
sure.
being displaced.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Like,
Yeah.
That's actually
right.
true.
So I do think control is a fear-based.
So it's just a different fear than I was thinking of when you initially said that. That makes sense.
So yeah, there's a fear for like safety and that kind of thing. But then there's fears of them making mistakes that maybe you fell into in a temptation, or a fear that they're going to make the wrong choices. So you keep them from certain people and friends. And then there's that fear of being displaced.
Yeah, a fear of your own identity going away because you've tied it up in motherhood and you're watching that go away.
Yeah.
I think when we do that, when we're holding on too much in the younger years, what we don't realize is that as the years pass, the stakes just get higher. I always have this vivid remembrance of the different things I learned when we were first married. So we spent basically 2 years living in an over the garage apartment in the backyard of older experienced parents that had 6 adopted children. And like at least 3 of them were in high school. So they were in the thick of it. And the mom talked to me and I learned all sorts of interesting things from just, what was going on at her house. And, adding the adoption layer, there was just a lot of things going on that I had never experienced before. I just remember her realizing her son's senior year that she had handicapped him because she had rescued him so much. And so she talked about how freshman year, he starts calling, I forgot my lunch. I forgot my homework. I forgot whatever. And she would bring it to him. And she basically let him crash and burn senior year because she realized what she had done. And she was like, do I really think that his mom's going to come and bring him his stuff when he's in college, or his mom's going to come and bring him his stuff when he's got his first job? I'll never forget it, because what she was regretting was that she rescued him freshman year. If he had learned the lesson, she wouldn't have had to teach the hard thing when the stakes were higher, because now it's senior year and you've got scholarships and you've got this and that there was all these considerations that made it harder to let go than if she had done it when he was younger.
Yeah. It only increases from there.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Like we think about, we don't want our child to lose their job, but if they lose it at 15, that's way better than losing it at 25 when maybe they're like young, married, and people are depending on them.
Yep.
There's a book that keeps coming up. A person recommended it, or maybe 2 people have recommended it. And then I found it referenced in Barefoot and Balanced. And then another book that I read that had a completely different angle to it. And it's called The Gift of Failure by LaHaye, I think is the last name. Anyway, I'll have to double check on that. but it's on my to be read list because it talks about allowing for small failures when kids are young, because it is a gift, because it teaches us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can remember an example of that happening when my oldest was probably 11 or 12, somewhere in that, probably 11. I think it was before 12 hit.
Yay, 12. So great.
But I'd given him a job to do, and he was dawdling and all of that and not doing it. And I realized I had to stop. I gave him a job, and I was thinking of it as my responsibility to make sure he did the job. And every time I would come out, he would start acting like he was doing it or whatever. But, it's just typical.
Totally.
And so at one point, it was like an hour or 2 hours before he had an afternoon boys church club that, a great thing to go to. But I said, you've already been out here this long. I don't really see any progress. If you don't have this done, you can't go. I knew it was not very likely. Like, it was within the realm of possibility that he could go, but he would have to work like I'm not sure I'd ever seen him work. and he didn't. He did pick up the pace and still didn't get it done in time. And he did not go to boys club that day. But he did learn a lesson, and it was way worth it. That's just a memorable one because I remember kind of agonizing over.
Right.
Maybe that was too harsh. Maybe I gave him too much to do. But I also knew that if I reneged,
right,
that would be really bad.
Totally.
Yep. And now he's a real estate agent and known as a go-getter. So I guess it worked.
Good job, Mama. Good job.
Well, I think when you get adult children, you realize, no, it wasn't me. Praise God for
that's true.
Being the one at work with our kids.
That's true. In fact, I feel like that's part of the beauty of this. Instead of at the end of it, recognizing that it's actually all God.
Yes.
I feel like the foundation of this is realizing all along the way that this is all God. And so just like when I'm planting a garden, I do my duty with the garden, right? Or at least ideally I do. Otherwise I have a brown thumb. But I'm not like constantly doing things. I'm trusting that things are going to take their natural course for the most part. And then my job is to, in addition to doing my regular duties, step in when it seems like something's going really wrong, because that's also part of my duty. But I just felt like that act of stepping back with a garden is you're trusting in the order of things. You're trusting in the God who created the world to work in a certain way. That's the same thing here. We get to mother by trusting the Lord. So yes, I need to know what's up with my children and all that kind of stuff, but it's not all on me. So I don't have to interfere. And that is, it's actually a very delightful and free and occasionally amusing way to raise children.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's not all on us to make sure all the outcomes turn out.
Yeah.
And that's where we start interfering, where we don't need to interfere, but we can just watch and see how it goes and then see God at work in their lives. But I think that has to be balanced with the other problem with masterly inactivity, which is taking that term as an excuse for just plain old neglect.
I have quotes. Okay. I turned to that because I thought this would come up. First of all, this is probably one of my favorite quotes because I think it's hilarious. The mother who is not up to children is at their mercy and need expect no quarter. But she says, Charlotte Mason says in her chapter on masterly inactivity that this actually requires parents and teachers to be omniscient. So she says, their children expect this of them, and a mother or father who could be hoodwinked is a person easy to reckon with in the mind of even the best child. For children are always playing a game, half of chance, half of skill. They are trying how far they can go, how much of the management of their lives they can get for the taking, and how much they must leave in the hands of the stronger powers. I'm skipping a little bit. She, meaning the mother, must see without watching, know without telling, be on the alert always, yet never obviously fussily so. This open-eyed attitude must be sphinx-like in its repose. The children must know themselves to be let alone, whether to do their own duty or to seek their own pleasure. The constraining power should be present but passive, so that the child may not feel himself hemmed in without choice. And I was thinking about this, that I think my parents are really good at this, because I remember, well, my mom used to pray that we would get caught. And then she told us that she prayed that we would get caught. And so I remember feeling like there were times in high school when I faced certain temptations. And like the main reason why I wasn't that tempted was because I knew my dad would find out. I just knew. Like, I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen. And that was not a transaction I was willing to be engaged in, right? Like, it's not, I didn't want to face that. And so that this idea of like back behind it all was the idea of this omniscient parent who somehow was going to know what happened. And then I knew what would happen after that. It's very freeing as a teenager to be like, yeah, my parents would never allow me to do that.
Yep.
And that's kind of the end of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice to be able to blame the decision that I wanted to make, but was getting pressure to not make, on my parents.
Right.
But it did require me to know that somehow they would know, which I think is where we get that stereotypical mom in the kitchen with the eyes in the back of her head, right?
My kids claim that they're like, how did you even see that? And with my husband too, they're like, how did you know? I was like, because God endows us with the ability to catch you doing the wrong things because he loves you.
That's right.
Yes. Yep.
That's right.
Be sure your sins will find you out.
That's right.
God's blessing on you.
And I have found the neighborhood spy network to be very helpful at times, because little kids love to tell on each other. Oh, really? He did that. Thank you for telling me.
Yes, we have people all over the valley that say, oh, I saw so-and-so's pickup driving really fast. Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. Because we have people everywhere.
That's right.
And they're nice and nosy into my children's business, which I appreciate. People that we know and go to church with and that love our children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we tell our kids too, is when they get caught, it's because God loves you that you got caught.
That's right.
It is a good thing.
Because it's the loving father who disciplines his children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and in the masterly inactive mother, teacher, the non-interfering, watchful mother who is not neglecting her children. You know, the child left to himself brings shame on his mother.
Mm-hmm.
An important part of having this attitude is that this is how our children get initiative and that like executive function. This is how they grow up and become responsible adults.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a given these days.
Yeah.
This actually takes intention to go against the stream, especially for our kids now, and also for us as parents. And so we have to say, are we willing to do the work and to hold the line on consequences and let the kids stand or fall by their own effort when they are little, when they are preteens, when they're in middle school and high school, because that's going to pay off by having kids who are competent when they grow up.
Well, and I think that's a really good thing that you mentioned there about consequences, because I do think you can read some of these sections in Charlotte Mason and start to feel like no consequences, or like the only consequences are the ones that somehow happen through life. I was this cause actively and I had this effect. So I did this and I fell down or whatever. You can start to feel like she's only open to natural causes. But I think what's going on actually is that she's against manipulation. So we can have consequences. It's just that we're letting them choose.
Yeah.
And then we sweep in with the consequence that they were already aware of. And there's not this, don't do that, because remember what's going to happen to you, which is really not giving them that freedom to stand or fall by their own efforts.
Right. No drama.
Yeah. So they do something dumb in the neighborhood, like the time my kids used a BB gun and shot out the neighbor's sliding glass door. They had to work for ages and ages to pay for that thing.
Yep.
Because those are not cheap.
Or even, in my earlier story, that was my son missing the event that he wanted to go to.
Mm-hmm.
That was artificial, but it was representative. Like it's business before pleasure. You have to get your work done before you can go do something fun. And especially as homeschoolers, I think we have to make sure there are opportunities for learning consequences more, because there isn't outside standards as much, and there aren't grades, and there aren't deadlines unless we make them.
Yeah.
So we have to be making some kind of consequence for work done well or not. And it doesn't have to be a grade, and it doesn't have to work like a school works.
Mm-hmm.
But we should be making them have that experience of, I can do my work well and good things happen, or I can be a slacker and bad things will happen.
Yeah, which means that kids who can slack and still be successful are very dangerous.
That's true.
I have a high functioning slacker in my house.
I am a high functioning slacker.
But I'm saying, like, that means that we have to take those children and put them in situations where they cannot be successful while slacking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
because
hard.
Otherwise they don't lose. It is hard. They don't learn the lesson otherwise, though.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things we have to do is give them lots of examples and perhaps even stories and kind of these ideas that excellence is something that should be for itself, right? Certain kids who are slackers and can get by because they are intelligent and it comes easy. I think they also need compassion for people who it doesn't come easy to. And so reading stories and books that focus on people actually putting in all their effort to, attain what maybe came easily is one of the ways that we have talked about it too in our own homes, because one of my kids is not dyslexic and it's very easy for them. Mm-hmm. School is very easy for them. And they had a real hard time with compassion towards siblings that it did not come easy. And so we spent quite a bit of time, discussing what it's like and
who's actually going to be stronger in the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes back to that grit thing. Like, this isn't something you've ever had to persevere through. So when you come to a roadblock, these guys have already been, doing this for so long and have tools and are equipped to handle the hard things that are coming up. You will have to work on those things. It'll be hard.
Yeah. I was thinking about what the children really get out of this. And it sounds to me like what we're really saying is that the children really, they get the freedom to grow up into responsible adults.
Yes.
Yes.
Because you can't really be responsible or feel responsible if there's no direct correlation between your choices and the results of those choices.
I know Charlotte Mason talks about the idea of magnanimity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard it described as a great soul, being magnanimous. Mm-hmm. And if you don't ever have the opportunity, like, and we'll do wise letting alone or making mistakes and then overcoming or making those good choices, then there is going to be no magnanimity.
That's interesting.
I think they're connected.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, doesn't literally it kind of means like large-heartedness or
large-heartedness. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know where I read great soul then. Maybe that was somebody else. But anyway.
Well, it's probably another
translation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
But large-heartedness, right? Yeah, you're going to have a real hard time if you've always ever been controlled. And then when you finally get some letting alone, you don't know what to do with it.
I had thought before about this idea of like learning to make decisions. If you're never allowed to make any decisions, decision making itself is a skill.
Yeah.
Right.
If you don't get much practice, then you become not good at decisions. And then depending on your personality, you're either going to feel confident in things you ought not to feel confident in, or you're going to be constantly second guessing yourself, insecure. Like, that's also not a good adulthood, right? To be constantly doubtful. But I hadn't thought about the idea of compassion And I guess that kind of goes to the whole where I was talking about how I would have stolen my daughter's satisfaction in just enjoying her own hard work from getting on the swing when she was a toddler. That component, the trying and the failing or the conquering something hard, that all of that builds that kind of compassion and acceptance of others that is part of magnanimity. That's really interesting. I had not thought of that angle.
Well, another angle that just brought up in my mind that I had never really connected as being a part of masterly inactivity before, but maybe it is when we have children who are people pleasers, they can look to us to try to make decisions for them because they want to make us happy.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ask, we might need to not tell them which we would prefer, or, to be watchful that we don't let them have us make all their decisions for them, because they do need practice making decisions.
Man, what would that be like? I have no people pleasers in my family. I'm surrounded.
I have one. And I actually recently, and it was kind of funny the way a certain situation played out, where I had kind of given advice thinking that I was being helpful. And then new information surfaced where it was like, yeah, actually the decision that I was encouraging was probably not the best one. So then I'm, talking with my daughter, and she knows what she wants to do, which is, I would say, the new best decision in light of current information. But I had, given my advice before that. So my advice was to do exactly the opposite of what she was wanting to do. And I basically didn't really change my advice. Instead, what did I say? I think I said something like, someday when you're a mom, you're going to have to be comfortable making a decision that goes against the advice of people that you generally trust and admire. So I think you need to get up your courage right now and stop worrying about your mom.
That's a great example, because you could have just said, oh, you're right. And like given her that reassurance of she has the right answer now.
Yeah.
But instead going back to maybe you can make your own decision here and it will be better.
Yeah. Well, I just was like, how many times, isn't that one of the big struggles with young motherhood, is that everybody tells you all this stuff and you feel like you have to do what everyone says, but God gave the job to you, not someone. So yes, it's good to take advice, but that's what I told her basically was like, it is good to listen to advice, but listening to advice means that you considered it. It doesn't mean that you just blindly did whatever everybody told you to do. Like that's not
right.
That's substituting advice for your own volition at that point.
This is why I have this verse memorized. It's 2 Timothy 1:7, right? For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So that we know that sometimes, yes, we do get lots of good advice and things like that, but sometimes we just need to pray about it and go forward.
That example points out again that we are making these parenting, teaching decisions based on who our children are going to grow up to be, remembering that our job is to train them for adulthood. Our job isn't to make their life easy. Our job isn't to make them like us. Our job isn't to make sure they have zero gaps in their education.
Yeah.
Our job is to raise them to go. And this is a part of that job.
Before we really wrap this up, I do have one more quote here. This is kind of funny. I didn't say on our outline what are its various components because I was looking at her chapter, but she actually has a subtitle that says component parts of masterly inactivity.
Oh, okay.
So she says the component parts are authority. And I think based on other things she said, it's, like our authority generally, but also the instruction we've given them in the Lord, that they understand right from wrong. So she doesn't really suggest a completely hands-off approach before the age of 10. And I think that's because in earlier years, you are still more in the habit training part. And so there is a sense in which habit training then leads to giving them this freedom. Not that it's a tight division, but this definitely appears in her book for raising older children. But so she says authority, but then she says good humor.
That's a good one.
Yeah, yep. I thought so too.
You forget that.
Yeah, she goes on and when she talks about that, she says, let not the nervous, anxious, worried mother think that this easy, happy relation with her children is for her. She may be the best mother in the world, but the thing that her children will get from her in these vexed moods is a touch of her nervousness, most catching of complaints. She will find them fractious, rebellious, unmanageable, and will be slow to realize that it is her fault, not the fault of her act, but of her state. If we don't want anxious, worried children, she's saying the opposite of that is to be good-humored ourselves.
Yeah.
And then she says confidence in ourselves and also confidence in the children. That's why habit training precedes this, is because our confidence in our children, it is greater when you just spent 10 years actively training them. You aren't going from a chaotic toddlerhood to then here's all this freedom as you're starting to reach puberty. Instead, you're, you know what I'm saying? Like you have this foundation of being well-trained in a number of different ways and in a number of different habits. And you're giving those things as a gift to help be almost like guardrails as they are given more and more freedom as they're growing up.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that if you didn't do that and you missed those years that you're stuck.
I agree.
It doesn't. I think the difference is possibly that you have less confidence in your children. So you have a greater struggle.
Oh yeah. I could see that.
That's what I've found in talking with other moms, is that the ones that are struggling with giving teenagers freedom, it's because they know, and sometimes it was beyond their control, honestly, but they know that they didn't give their children a really firm foundation. And I think it is scarier.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is they're going to turn 18, 19, 20 and be adults regardless.
Yeah.
So we can't go back, even if it's like, well, I didn't even know Christ or any of this stuff until my child was 11. Well, they're still going to turn 18 on the same clock. Anyway, I think in that situation, you probably have to remind yourself more that God still loves this child more than you and still created a reality that it will benefit your child to brush up against.
Yep.
Good point.
Any final thoughts, guys, on masterly inactivity? Other than that, it's not free time.
And it's not neglect.
Nope.
Not neglect. Yeah.
It's not really an activity at all.
No.
I feel like it's a chance for us to grow in virtue, because that masterliness requires us to have, in many ways, it's self-mastery, right?
Yes. Oh, and that's a good point.
I think that's where it gets difficult, is that we have to think more and restrain ourselves, but it's good for us too.
Yep.
We're going to be able to help our children gain self-mastery if we're gaining it also.
That's a good point. I was just thinking it might make us better mothers-in-law.
That also.
That probably. Yes.
Someone else who should be maybe more inactive is a mother-in-law.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of the sisterhood of the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend and then discuss it with her. This is a great way to continue the conversation. All of the books and things we mentioned today are linked in our show notes. Just go to scolesisters.com/SS122 to check it out. Don't forget to sign up for Dead White Guys, Classical Education Meets Critical Theory, our annual spring training featuring Monique Dusson and Krista Bontrager from the Center for Biblical Unity. These 2 live sessions take place on May 9th and May 16th at 2 p.m. Pacific. For more information or to sign up, go to scolesisters.info/CRT. In our next episode, Mystie and I sit down with Brent Pinkall, author of the book Redeeming the Six Arts, A Christian Approach to Chinese Classical Education. Brent makes a fascinating application of the 5th commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. How does this commandment dovetail with our pursuit of classical education? Listen to find out. Until then, we want to remind you once again that homeschooling is a marathon you needn't run alone. So open up your eyes and look around you. Find your sisters.
Hello. So, are you guys coming? I'm just trying to make sure you're using the correct links because Abby, I saw you on the document for tomorrow's recording. And so I wasn't sure if maybe you went to tomorrow's Zoom meeting. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure you weren't lost, Abby. Sorry, I had the wrong Zoom link.
I would like to
Brandy?
go.
Okay.
What? Brandy's going to go first?
You were ready, Abby. Go for it.
Yes, I'm ready.